I'm Dave.
I'm Buddy.
And welcome to our 8-part series on unpacking reactivity and leash aggression. So this 8-part series can be utilized as a package if you're working remote or to assist you if you're currently working on this issue. If you do find value in it, please do us a favor and share it, and hopefully we can get it out to the wider community.
Just like episode 1, sorry we're not doing 6 this time. We're doing 2 beefy ball giveaways. Our special word this time, so all you need to do is I'm going to say dunny budgie.
Which is it's the Australian term for a blowfly.
Okay. Learn something new every day. So we'll give 2 of those away. So when dunny budgie comes out at some point in the middle of this conversation, chuck the timestamp in one of the social comments and we'll send you out 2 beefy balls.
Yeah.
Cool. What are we talking about?
All right. So we want to talk about really the broader structure of a program around this. So we are going to get into the meat and bones of the program details and what it's made up of as the series goes on. But this is looking just more so at a broad structure of how the program may look. So I think the first part of the conversation really is, and a lot of people find this, is the limitations of really trying to work around this. So it's one of probably the first questions we often get is, well, how do I actually go practice these things that you want to do? So probably the first point on that is that a lot of the work that you need to do is actually done away from other dogs. And I can't really express that strong enough. I actually know of some exceptional trainers who do all of the work of this away from other dogs. And then by the time you roll the dog out, the dog is really not that interested in that thing anymore. So probably the first point to discuss is really the problem of adrenaline around this. Okay, so what we're dealing with in many regards is this adrenaline spike. So one of the things that happens when a dog on lead has an adrenaline spike is 2 things. Pain threshold goes up. So the dog can't, if you're using a little bit of leash pressure, I'm not even talking about like hard corrections or even just mild leash pressure, or even if you wanted to firm that up, the dog is now no longer feeling that. That's just adding to the game. If anything, it just adds frustration and it will increase the response.
It's like football. Like when we were done playing footy, and when I'm done on a Sunday, I look around and I'm like, oh man, I got bruises everywhere. At the time, did not feel a thing. But because the adrenaline's high, and then I'm like, oh man. So it doesn't even feel it at the time. So I think it's such an important thing to realize, like, a dog is not listening to you when that's happening.
No, not at all. And the other difficulty that adrenaline causes is that it decreases appetite. So we're trying to use often food or some sort of reward system in the process. So now we have a dog that won't take food, which many of you will say, I'm trying to work through this issue, but my dog won't take food. And the answer is correct, it won't, because of adrenaline. And we can no longer use leash pressure, or leash pressure is just adding to the flame. So we're trying to always beat adrenaline. And one of the things that I always really promote heavily is that we're not looking for, so let's say we've got this dog in, say, a small class, and we've got dogs with similar issues around this, or it's the one dog that's struggling with this issue. There's no point that dog coming into the class and exploding, and then at the 7-minute point, that dog then gets better. That's not helping you the next time you come in. That's created an association of blow up on lead, extreme adrenaline spike. Often, depending on the driver behind this, there's a lot of dopamine associated with that as well, which makes it far more likely that it's going to reoccur. And then the dog basically comes off that spike. And the problem with adrenaline as well is it stays in your system. So it's not like the dog is not really in a great learning state for quite a considerable period of time after that period. So what we're really trying to do is beat that adrenaline spike. I'm not looking for dogs to explode and then come off after a few minutes. We're actually looking to see the dog bubbling up, and within 3 to 5 seconds, we take action to immediately stop that. So one of the things that we often see is people being quite dead on the lead when the dog is starting to bubble. So you need to start reading your dog from up top and feeling when that's starting to happen, and immediately draw their attention back to you and do some sort of activity with you. But that, we'll get to a lot of these details as we go. But the point is, you do need to find ways to beat adrenaline. So that's
it's the most common thing we again, I don't have a specific number, but I can tell you the amount of times I hear that people come in we go to a new place, they're fine after 15 minutes, and I'm like, or 10 minutes of just I let them go around, do their own thing, and then they kind of like, no. If that's your plan at the moment, we would advise against that, because again, like you said, you're just creating this association, external reinforcement, and then the dog's like, okay, I'm done now. What do you want to do? We want to flip that. So yeah, that's the most common thing we see. After 10 minutes, they calm down. This will start to address that immediately.
And if you're dealing with a dog that has either extreme value in other dogs or is very prey driven, those things are invariably positive to your dog. So your dog, even just by pulling on the lead and blowing up, so barking is a self-reinforcing behavior.
Massive.
So there's dopamine associated with all of that. And if at any point your dog then gets access to the dog, then that is an extremely rewarding scenario. So when you're dealing with that level of dopamine, you're essentially dealing with addiction. And as we know with addiction, if we have a friend or family member that has struggled with alcohol, we don't dangle the beer across the room and expect them to just deal with it. It's really important that we're very careful about those types of things. So for some dogs that have essentially an extreme dopamine addiction towards dogs, we need to start the process away from other dogs. And it is important, typically in our programs here, we spend we'll often do, if dogs have this issue, we really want to be doing 6 to 10 private lessons with them. And the first 2 or 3, we are focusing heavily on establishing that handler relationship and trying to switch that value back. So we actually don't mind, and especially with working dogs, because they're dopamine addicts. And we can essentially create that addiction, but the addiction can be shifted back to the handler. And once you've got that established, or at least a more positive relationship with the handler, so the dog perceives the handler of being much greater value, well then when you're actually trying to communicate with your dog when you're out and about, you actually have the ability to run a behavior mod program, not just hit that really quick adrenaline spike, and then you're essentially in emergency management. Some dogs can be worked, I'll just note as well, some dogs can be worked through a mid-level of adrenaline spike. They can go up, and plenty of times when I've helped people with this issue, or I'm in a workshop scenario, the dog will do a mini spike and we can pull them back and then work them through it. That's okay to a degree, but a lot of dogs that hit that spike really, really hard, then you essentially need to reset. The session's done, 180, get out of there. So one of the questions we'd often get is, well, what do I do if that happens? Well, just leave. So just 180, turn, walk. Don't make a fuss of it, and just go. And then so if you're walking on the footpath and the dog's coming this way, 180, go the other way.
So for dogs and handlers that are new to this process of this sort of like engagement training and handler value, oftentimes people might look at us and they go, well, I don't have 2 hours a day to train my dog like you do. And the first thing I say is, I've never trained my dog for 2 hours in a day. So can you talk about the common misconceptions of a longer session being better to start showing a dog more exposure? I guess I understand the logic of that, but can you explain the flaws in why a long session might be detrimental in this situation?
Because it's the way the dog is behaving at the 15-minute point will have really no effect on how that dog reacts the next time it comes into that moment and scenario. So you're really trying to address that first minute or two. That should be your sole focus. So that's what we're trying to do, because ultimately the dog could have an adrenaline spike, then just wear itself out. And then you're just dealing with a tired dog in that scenario. That doesn't really tell you anything in terms of behavior modification. One of the things, so if we're looking at time spent with your dog, one of the things that people do a lot of is walk their dogs. They walk their dogs sometimes an hour a day. Now, if you have a working dog or a drivey dog, and that can be even a terrier or lots of little toy breeds as well, can be super punchy and drivey. That 1 hour walk, sure, for some dogs will wear them out, but for certainly my dog, your dog, and a lot of working dogs, it's not even a warm-up. They come back from that walk and they're like, what are we doing? The value in your time, you can spend your time in a far more valuable way. We can go out and do a play session that involves a little bit of training, so really working the mind and body and really improving the relationship through play in about a 7-minute session, and actively gas our dogs. And after that, their whole demeanor will change. And quite often they'll be quite content for the day. So the way you want to shift the way you essentially spend your time, so you're getting more bang for your buck. Because what you want to do is increase your value with your dog. Short walking is fine to do, but I probably take my dog out for a walk maybe 3 times a week. It's not a primary activity. More often we go out and work and do something together. But just shifting the way you work with your dogs is quite important. But longer sessions are not more helpful.
Yeah, I think with the walk, just one thing to add is some of you guys know Sky, my white sort of pet dog. She's extremely environmentally driven, and a lot of dogs are. So the walk, even if she's not a sport dog, she's not built to play for hours and hours, but she's so externally driven, environmentally driven. If I were to do 2-hour walk, 1-hour walk a day, and just give all that reinforcement to the environment, that would be extremely detrimental to what I'm trying to do as far as an engagement standpoint, hang with me. And why we're talking about this is because if I don't have any of that engagement, if I have everything going into the environment, then I've got no chance when whatever dog sees another dog. If they don't want to listen to me just in the front yard, they sure as hell aren't going to listen to me wherever we are. So where do you like to practice this sort of, like if you were setting up a training plan, what type of places do you look to train?
To work, yeah. So I guess the first thing to define as well is just really quickly is engagement. So Buddy just used the word then, and some of you will know what that means, but just to define what that is, when we're talking about engagement, it's not focus. So focus is a behavior you can teach your dog to look at you, and you can reward that. It's a behavior. Engagement is an attitude that we want in the dog, and we want a dog that's engaged with the handler and actively wants to work with the handler. So a really simple example of this is I can have my dog next to me in a sit, and looking up at me with ducks in the background. And all my dog wants to do, it's shaking and looking up at me, and all it's doing is thinking about the ducks. I want to chase the ducks. That's all it's thinking in that moment. That's not what we want. We want a dog, I don't care if the dog's in the sit and even looking at me. I just want the dog kind of cruising my way, pressing my way with the ducks in the background, saying, let's do something. That's engagement, and that is a better response. We want the dogs in the vicinity of external stimulus that it may have found interesting in the past to actively want to work with us. And that's what we're trying to create. And that's what you'll hear us talking about a lot is engagement. The way we develop that often is through things like play, and there's food activities and training, general training activities that we'll do. Now, in terms of where to do these things, well, the starting place is away from everything at the start. So when you're trying to develop and establish this, we do this in a very low distraction environment where we're just showing the dog we can actually be the most fun thing. So that's the first thing. Then we step that out. So one of the places that a lot of people should actually just go and do a little bit more engagement and activity is just out the front of your house.
Yeah,
so just stepping out the front on that bit of footpath, if you've got that style of home with a nice footpath out front, that section just in front of your house, go out there. It takes you can do 1 to 2 minute sessions, literally that short. Go out and just play with your dog, get them to chase a bit of food, make sure they're nice and hungry, for a couple of minutes several times a day. Because what's going to happen, if that's a lot of fun for your dog, you can take your dog's breakfast out there. That's the first thing they get for the day. Their expectation of going out your house is no longer, or we're going on the hunt to go stalk those dogs or see my favorite mates in the neighborhood. It's now, oh, I get to go out the front and do something with you. So you're immediately shifting the relationship in that environment, and then that can start cruising into lower arousal activities like just a bit of loose lead walking, mini recalls, all sorts of little fun things, all on lead at the front of your house. Then I would suggest you just work your street. You become very accustomed to working your street when you know there's not going to be a lot of dogs around. Then we can move to various places, and one of the suggestions I always get people to do is think about sort of 5 locations near them that are about a minute drive. Chuck your dog in the car, don't walk there, chuck your dog in the car, drive there. Let's say you go to where there's a tennis court fenced in, then you might have some dogs off in the distance. Just get your dog into that tennis court, shut the gate, play with your dog in that space for a couple of minutes and go. You might then go to the outside of a dog park when you know it's really, really quiet. And you do all this on a scaling basis. So don't put your dog in too deep too early.
Couple of minutes. You literally mean 2 minutes.
And we mean 2 minutes. And the reason is we want, because that's when you're having the problem. The problem it's not about the spike, the dog blows up and then it comes down 15 minutes later. We're trying to fix that first 2 minutes. And we want intensity. So we'll talk about the techniques as we sort of go through the series. But the first part is just establishing and changing emotion. Because if you go out and do something, we don't want the dog to get out of the car either and start sniffing. It's out of the car and straight into the game and activity with you, because then the association changes. So then the dog starts going to, oh, we're rolling up to this place. I know we get out of the car and I get to have my favorite food, or I get to play with my favorite toy for a couple of minutes. And when the dog still wants more, end it. So at that point, we're done, car, go, and the dog's like, damn, ugh, that was fun. I wanted to do that, and you've actually just cut that on me. So that process then changes the mood for next time. When the dog turns up to that place again, all it's thinking about, it's no longer thinking about dogs in the distance, it's thinking about you and that fun thing. This is the process of building engagement, creating hand of value, and completely shifting the game.
If you think of everything like a ladder, like a stepping ladder, I think the biggest thing that people make the mistake of is if the first rung of the ladder is your backyard or your garage and the dog's pretty engaged with you there, they go, cool, recall's awesome in the backyard, and they go to Altona Dog Beach or whatever it is. You just went up about 9 rungs on that ladder. And there is, we've mentioned before, someone's talked to us like, hey, you guys should do a TV show. And we were like, it'd be pretty boring. Like, I don't think you'd want to watch it, because there's hours and hours and hours of this sort of just work that's quite fun for us, but to watch it, you'd be like, oh, you just brought the dog out, you're feeding the dog. Oh, you just brought the dog out, you're playing the dog. And there'd be weeks of that. So I would always encourage people, underestimate your engagement rather than overestimate it, and just follow this process, slow, steady, and then don't test to be like, okay, I think we're ready for this. We weren't ready for that. It's better just slow and steady, and then you're not getting yourself in a dunny budgie when the dog accidentally blows up at someone.
I guess some of you want to know timeframes. So how long does it take? So that completely depends on the individual. So that's going to vary greatly. But as a general rule, just to give you just a ballpark, which is kind of a bullshit ballpark, but I'll give you one. If you want to create significant change in terms of emotion, and you wanted to really quarantine this to create significant shift in how your dog perceives you in different environments, 3 months of this type of activity. You just go and do this flat out, and you don't even worry. People will always be like, oh, "I've got to test my dog. I want to see where it's at," and you're scratching the itch, or you're ripping the scab off too early. You need to just lean into this process of just doing these sessions. And the other thing people would say is, well, if I'm just doing these 2-minute bites, well, firstly, you can do multiples of those a day. Well, then is my dog getting enough? We're not saying you can't go cruising with your dog somewhere, but just drive out to somewhere where you know you're not going to get bothered. Industrial zones can be great, or find that little bit of that sort of area near your house where you can go and you're not going to get bothered, and let your dog go cruise and explore. That's all fine. We're not saying take away your dog's freedom. That part is fine. We're just saying in terms of you competing with external stimulus, you want to make sure that those key areas where you know you're going to have to go long term, we start working towards changing the motion in those spaces.
Yeah, I think for me too, I'm huge on that. Making it contextual to where we go to a place and go, hey, this is your free time place. This is where we hang out. But that's mostly, this is what I had to do with Sky. That's your free time place. Everywhere else, I want some engagement. And so that way the dog defaults to you. And then when we're in that one specific place, hey, this is your time. I think that can be really powerful, making places themselves contextual.
Do that, because it'll just help you in terms of establishing emotion. And pick, obviously, you're picking places for the free time where it's going to be very safe and quiet. In the long run, it doesn't matter. In the long run, you can break all the rules. So once you've created proper handler value, well, then that ultimately gives you complete freedom to do whatever you please. So the end goal through all this process is you don't have to actually worry about the rules, because you know you can do as you please, and the relationship with you trumps everything, and that in itself keeps the dog safe. Now, some dogs, granted, pending if they've been rehomed or genetics and various issues, you won't get to that point, but you will still get to a point where you greatly increase the dog's overall well-being just through working through this process.
Can you touch back on, so you mentioned classes before. What's your sort of, one of my favorite things to do as a trainer is to bring people in for privates who think they're screwed. Then we start working with them, and all of a sudden, hey, by the way, class is now an option for you, and people are wrapped with that. What's your sort of when do you think classes are beneficial? When do you absolutely go, nope, you've got to do privates? Can you talk about how that works for just the people doing, whether they're doing obedience club or working with a local trainer or anything like that?
So the main catch with classes, and trust me, we've played around with all sorts of formats on this over the years, is that if you're putting a group, let's say you have a reactivity class, that it's the worst hotbed because you end up putting 4 or 5 reactive dogs together, which are all going to trigger each other. So the ideal class would be 3 neutral dogs and then 1 dog that is struggling with this issue, which it doesn't make sense because what's the advantage to the 3 other dogs? And then what the class wouldn't really flow and make sense. The benefit is, and I hope just through our discussion you can understand, is that you need privates because all that matters at the start is your relationship with the dog. And that's mostly, and this is why in terms of workshops, I'm not worried really about the history too much, and I do want to hear the history, but I don't worry about it too much before going in, because all I really want to see early days is the handler-dog relationship, because that tells me a great deal about what we need to do and where the issues may lie before we start dealing with some of the other work. So private lessons are always a great place to start. I appreciate that it can be a little bit more expensive. If you're going to a class format and not seeing productive change, stop. Do not keep going. Going to a class format, because the ideal class format, and we've done a little bit with a couple of our classes here, with some of our longer term clients, is we allow them just to come in for a minute and then take the dog out, just to work on that initial spiking issue. So we might have some reasonably well-trained dogs here, but they've got a dog that they're struggling with a bit. They bring that dog in for a couple of minutes, do some engagement work, and then take the dog out to start changing the dog's emotion carefully through that process. But as a general rule, classes are not going to be a great option at the start. Hit up some privates first and then move into class.
I think the benefit we have here with our classes as well is we do cap them. And what can happen is sometimes classes can get very, very, very large, like very large. And there's a difference to me between seeing a guy at the pub play some acoustic music and it's pretty cool, it's not too bad, and a rock concert. Because the stimulus difference is massive, and that's sort of how that can be. So if it is time to move to class and you think your dog's ready, just always making sure and being mindful that there's not an incredible amount of stimulus that's going to bring us back from those private lessons. So either as smooth a transition as possible, if it's an option for you.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
What do we got for next one?
All right. So next episode, we'll be really diving a little bit more into the reasons and the main drivers behind this behavior. So just helping each of you out there understand why it is that your dog might be doing that, and that will define to a degree how we handle the process. So a lot of the things that we're talking about, like the whole concept around engagement, that will be the same, that same subject will carry on to all dogs, regardless of the emotional driver, but we will dive deeper into that. So hopefully we can give you a better understanding of what's happening with your dog before we then move into the actual strategies to start working through this.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.